My name is Ann Murphy. I'm a member of the NOVA Chapter Steering Committee, or leadership team, and a very long time, probably too long a time, convener and facilitator for these sessions for Northern Virginia Advocates for Justice. So the spring session that we have planned for you is intended to review what happened in the 2025 General Assembly that drew to a close, sort of closed in April, and to remind us that advocacy for justice is really a constant in our lives. Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy is our guide for state-level advocacy, and these chapter sessions help us remember to pivot a little bit, particularly in times like right now, to pivot from what's happening across the river in the nation's capital and to attend to what's going on right here in the Commonwealth and how the Interfaith Center is positioning itself to accomplish the work that it needs to do as we look to the future. So before we launch into the substance of this session, let us acknowledge that much of the prosperity that we enjoy today in the Potomac River Valley is wrapped up in the historical and ongoing harms by settlers and colonizers, both to the Nacotchtank, the Piscataway, and other indigenous people whose land was forcibly stolen, as well as to people of African descent whose bodies and labor were also stolen. So we're working in our own little circles, including this circle, if you will, to use restorative principles of inclusion and encounter, amends, and reintegration to make space for the stories of those people and to work toward a future where we can all thrive together. And we remember what has been in order to move forward into what will be. So through our own faith lens, let's observe a moment of silence for ourselves, our families, our community, our Commonwealth, our country, our world, and our planet. Thank you. So as noted on the flyer promoting tonight's session, there are 3 areas of interest that we want to share and discuss and respond to your questions and ideas. So again, use the chat function on the navigation bar to let us know what it is that you need clarification of. So the 3 areas that we're going to cover tonight, first and foremost, I think, we're going to meet and greet and get to know the center's new executive director, the Reverend Dr. LaKeisha Cook. Secondly, we're going to provide a glimpse of how the 2025 General Assembly turned out, the good, the not so good, and how our Northern Virginia legislators helped or hindered the efforts that the center was making. And then thirdly, we want to talk a little bit about next steps. What are the summer season opportunities for the center, but especially for our congregations and for each of us individually? So it's a fair amount of territory to cover, but we will conclude by 8:30 at the latest. So I have the pleasure of introducing the center's executive director, and I'm going to ask whoever is doing tech support to try to spotlight Reverend Dr. LaKeisha Cook. And I hope she has a good voice. She told me that she was preaching all weekend and that her voice might be a little raspy. So we're going to let her do what she needs to do. LaKeisha, are you there?
Thank you so much. Hi, Ann Murphy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for already giving me the disclaimer before I open my mouth that my voice is a little tired tonight, but God did keep it, so it's not completely gone. I did have the opportunity of preaching at two churches here in the Richmond area this weekend, and so two services back to back kind of wore my throat out just a little bit. And I woke up this morning and I was like, oh no, where's my voice? But it's starting to come back. But I'm glad that we have a chance to share together. I'm going to share some slides on my screen. Okay. So I just want to share a little bit about my background and a little bit of information about some of the visioning that I have for the center as we're moving forward. Just to give you some idea of who I am and where I'm from. I'm actually from the DMV area. I grew up in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. So the M of the DMV is home for me. So Northern Virginia, I always hold near and dear to my heart just because it was right there down 95 from where I grew up. I went to Frederick Douglass High School. I often tell people I grew up off of Pennsylvania Avenue, but on the Maryland side where the cows and the chickens are, not so much the White House. But I was very close to Andrews Air Force Base. So it was nothing for me to look up in the air and see Air Force One flying over my house. It was very normal. And for me, going to visit the national monuments was like a field trip every summer, I mean, every school year. And so government was always very touchable for me. And politics was very touchable because of, I think, because of where I grew up. So home is the Maryland area. I'm a proud graduate of a historically Black college and university. I went to Virginia Union University. I was able to be blessed with a full academic scholarship that brought me there as an undergraduate student. I enjoyed my time there so much. I accepted a call into ministry as I was a college student. And so as soon as I finished my bachelor's in sociology, I started my master's of divinity degree. So I'm also a graduate of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology. So Union absolutely helped me to find my voice and solidified my love for justice and the interconnected relationship between faith and justice. So while I was a college student, I actually interned at the General Assembly. So my very first entry point into working in state politics was as a clerk. So back way back when I was a college student, the way that they put bills together for the state legislature is they all had binders. And each night we would go in and take all of the bills that they discussed that day out of the binders. And then we would have to put new bills into the binders. And I used to get really frustrated when it was a really big bill because some of the bills were like multiple pages. So we had to collate everything. We had to make sure all the binders were together. And then we would go and put the binders on all of the desks. And it's really funny how life happens. I forgot that I did that internship until like really like maybe like a couple years ago. I remembered I was like, that's right. I worked at the GA. How did I forget that? But that was my entry point into state politics. But as I mentioned, I accepted my call into ministry when I was in college. I grew up, I am a licensed and ordained Baptist preacher. My home church is Antioch Baptist Church in Upper Marlboro. But my first job or ministry assignment was at a church in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Mount Hope Baptist Church. I served there as a youth pastor for 3 years while I was working through seminary. And then once I graduated seminary, I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And I spent almost 10 years in Phoenix, Arizona, and I worked for the Big Pink Church. This is the Big Pink Church. That's what we used to call it. It was in downtown Phoenix. And I worked for a pastor that was passionate about social justice. He actually helped to get Martin Luther King holiday recognized in Arizona. Arizona was the last state to recognize it as a holiday, a federal holiday. And he spearheaded that. And so if I already had like that fire burning of justice work, he absolutely poured the gasoline to make it burn even brighter. So I'm really grateful that I was able to, learn from him and work with him in full-time ministry. But I also had a chance, after I worked in full-time ministry for a while, I took a break, went back to school. That's how I take breaks, and got a master's in educational leadership. And I worked for a school district in Arizona for about 8 years. I was a district level administrator doing prevention programs and diversity and racial inclusion work. And I worked with some really powerful women and worked with some powerful people. And it actually continued to help me grow in my leadership skills and, again, do the justice work that I've been doing my entire life. And then I came and worked for Virginia Interfaith as the criminal justice reform organizer, and helped with the capital punishment abolition work. But then once I left as an organizer and moved to a board member position, I started working for an organization called Courageous Conversation. It's a racial equity consulting firm. So I was director of corporate nonprofit and government partnerships. So I did business development and taught people the power of being able to have courageous conversations about race, because it's going to be really hard for us to solve and really address racial disparities if we don't lean in a courageous way and even talk about race. And so I did that for many years, until I believe God called me back to work in Virginia Interfaith again. So I rejoined the staff on last year, and now that I'm back on staff, and now as the full-time executive director, I am excited about what's coming next for us. So if I were to describe myself, the things that I hold important and dear, I am a mom. I have two beautiful children, one that I inherited in marriage and kept through divorce, and one that I actually gave birth to. So I'm a mama, and I'm a fur baby mama. You'll see a picture of my fur baby. I am a faith leader, again, licensed and ordained Baptist preacher. I do still preach quite often. I'm starting to say yes a little bit more than I had been saying yes, because I see it as an opportunity to continue to spread the work that we do at Virginia Interfaith. And I describe myself as light being something that brings illumination, but light can also be destructive if it needs to be. So not only am I going to shine light, but hey, if we need to burn it down, we're going to burn it down. So I'm a mom, I'm a faith leader, and I am light. These are my children. So to the left is my daughter, Amaya. She's a rising senior in high school, competitive cheerleader, beautiful child, track star. I can't wait to see what she does in life. She's trying to figure out colleges right now. So those who believe in the words of prayer, pray for me as we get through this process. And then my son, my stepson that I talked about, is in the middle. He's my first baby. He just turned 35, so he's almost like a second parent to my daughter. But I had the pleasure of doing his wedding last summer. He just got married. And I'm a fur baby mama. This is Peru. He's my baby. He's the real baby of the family now. He's a Havanese. He's about 17 months old, and he runs everything. But this is my family, and my family I hold very near and dear to my heart. The things that I believe in the most that drive me in the work that I do is I truly believe in the power of community. There is a saying that comes out of the Eastern African tradition or culture called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu basically translates into the words, I am because we are. And it's really talking about the power of community. I can't truly know who I am fully as a human if I don't understand and see you fully as a human. And so it's not enough just for me to win. I want to see everyone win. And this driving principle drives my family, it drives my personal life, and it drives the work that I do. And so at Virginia Interfaith, for us, I think it's important that we just continue to build on the community that we have. We have a powerful foundation that's been building over the last 40 plus years. And so now I want us to continue to build on that. So how do we continue to build community? We look around and we identify who's the missing voices, who's not in the room, who do we need to do some intentional outreach to, and making sure that we're promoting a narrative that is both inclusive and welcoming, so that once we identify who the missing voices is, we create space in a real intentional way to hold them in the work that we do, and really making sure that we're taking a look at ourselves and making sure, if we say that we're Virginia Interfaith and we say that we're engaging people of faith and goodwill, how does that show up in the actions that we're taking with the intentional outreach that we're doing? So for me, some of the missing voices that I have already been able to see, there's an opportunity for us to do more to engage young people in our work. And we have our Student Day of Action that we do every year. So how do we continue to grow that so that those numbers get even bigger, so that we make sure that the legacy continues to move on in the organization? How do we continue to expand our reach into Southwest Virginia with some real intentionality? We've got Sheila already planning some things this summer to take us on an interfaith justice revival out to the Southwest, so that we're able to really engage and again, just make our footprint even bigger there. How do we expand if we're saying we're working with people of faith and goodwill? If there are people who don't believe in organized religion, then how do we make sure that they see that there is space for them in this work and that we want them to partner with us? And how do we continue to engage people of diverse faiths. We have a wonderful new addition to our staff, our fund developer, who leans into the Hindu and Buddhist faith tradition. And she's really working very hard to extend our outreach even into those faith communities. And so there's just some real intentionality of some opportunities that I've identified that I want to see what we can do as we lean into that, because I truly believe that we are all called for such a time as this. I lean into the words of Esther when Esther, when she was in a position to make a decision if she was going to speak up for her people and really fight on their behalf, she had a decision that she had to make. And I believe that we also are in a pivotal moment where there's some decisions that have to be made. I believe there's some intentionality to scare people into silence. But I do believe that we have a more powerful voice when we join our voices collectively together to continue to fight for justice. I had an opportunity to come up to your neck of the woods. I was in Northern Virginia at First Baptist Church of Vienna. I think there may even be some people on the call that were in the room with me on the night that we did this. I was very happy to be able to share the work of Virginia Interfaith. There was about 90 or so people in the room. And I will say, after I was able to share, I went back to sit down, and there were several faith leaders at the table where I was sitting, and they were like, "Okay, Dr. Cook, so are you going to open an office in Northern Virginia?" And I told them, I was like, "If you give me space at your church, we can come up once a month. You just figure it out." So then they started arguing over whose church was going to open up. So I'm still going to hold them to that, because I think that, when you provide intentional presence in spaces, it helps you to know the communities even the more so. So I'm excited about that opportunity. And I'm excited about some things that we have coming up. We just confirmed this weekend that there's going to be a gubernatorial candidate forum up in Northern Virginia. The date is going to be September 9th. There'll be more information that's coming out regarding the exact timing of it. But because we just confirmed this and I knew I was coming in with you tonight, I wanted to share that with you. So Virginia Tech has offered to let us use the space for free. They're paying for security, like they're covering a bulk of the cost. And so now we're working to just firm up details. So I want you to just save this date on your calendar, September 9th. You are the first to hear that. This is hot off the presses. But as we're getting more information, we'll make sure we get it to you. We're also planning a meet and greet. We're doing regional meet and greets so that I can get out to the different regions of the Commonwealth. And we have one planned for Northern Virginia. It's going to be on August 21st. That's another date I would love for you to save. We're still trying to figure out a place. We would really love to have it somewhere that we don't have to pay for, and will be open to us if we want to bring in alcoholic beverages. And so, if you know of any places, or if you want to help plan this particular meet and greet event, I have Tanya's email address is here. She's our fund developer. If you are interested in helping plan this event, I know that she would love the help. So please just shoot her an email. Um, so I'll leave you with this. Ann Murphy, I think I did my time good. Yep, I was actually a little shorter than norm than I was given. But Cory Booker, he recently said this several months ago, and I love this quote. And I just want to leave you with this quote. "I'm not going to allow my inability to do everything to undermine my ability to do something." So I believe that we are called to do something in this season. Is for us to figure out what that something is and to do it well. So I'm excited that I have the opportunity to share with you all, excited to have the opportunity to grow with you all. And thank you so much for giving me some time to share. So I will pull the slides down for a minute so I can see everybody again. Hi, everyone. And see if there's any questions that you have. Let me stop sharing.
Can we hold the questions to a little bit later? I want everybody to have a chance to say what they're supposed to say.
Absolutely.
And then we'll do that. A little
Okay.
round of applause for Keisha. Yay.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think you you certainly hit all the points that we were hoping to hear from. And I thought I knew you. But man, I learned a lot of classy new things about you, which are very exciting. So I did take some notes, and um, I love your vision about expanding the community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ann Murphy.
Okay, next up is Sheila Hurley Hennessy. Sheila Hurley Hennessy. That's like a mouthful. All very, very Irish, however, so.
But yes, so as you have heard, VICPP has been active through the General Assembly session. And I'm putting in the chat the page of our legislative priorities. You are welcome to look at our policy priorities. It's not the fully updated version. It doesn't have all the governor's actions on it, but it has most of the things on it while this PowerPoint is loading. But basically, as usual, we had 4 different issue areas with some extra fun adventures sprinkled in as desired.
Cool.
So first up, the big bucket that we do stuff in is criminal justice reform. And so ending indiscriminate youth shackling was a big issue this year. Basically, Virginia is one of only 11 states in the country that still have the ability to shackle, that is, chain wrists and ankles of young people for next to no reason at the discretion of whoever's in the courtroom that day. And so with this bill, which passed almost unanimously, I think potentially unanimously, this bill limits that youth shackling so that you can only do that if there's actual proof of danger to some degree. And a judge has to sign off before you can shackle a young person, which decreases the chance of folks being perceived as guilty, even in anticipation of hearing their case. This was a really exciting moment, unanimous support, and being signed by the governor. Goes into effect in July. Next on the criminal justice reform agenda was the restoration of voting rights. You may have heard about this one. It's been one we've worked on in coalition with some of our partners for a few years now. It's a constitutional amendment that automatically restores voting rights to people who have felony convictions after they've finished their time of incarceration, their sentences. A constitutional amendment, unlike a regular bill, does not need the governor's signature. It needs to pass the General Assembly 2 years in a row with an election in the middle. So it passed in 2025. We've got an election this fall, and if it passes in 2026, then it's up to us as the Virginia voters to put it in the Constitution. But it is on track for success. The third issue area under criminal justice reform is higher education in prison. This is a relatively new initiative for Virginia Interfaith. You've heard us talk a little bit about the Virginia Consensus for Higher Education in Prison, or VICPP. There was a bill this year that would have expanded access to education across the board, from basic literacy and GED all the way through college education. Sadly, the bill that we were supporting was amended to be very small, only a study, and then eventually those amendments were denied, so it was vetoed by the governor. So we know that Virginia Interfaith will be pushing for stronger policies to increase access to higher education for people who are incarcerated in coming years. All right. Realm number 2 is health equity. The unconscious bias bill that, once again, we've been talking about and working on for a few years would have required that every healthcare professional in the Commonwealth of Virginia go through an unconscious bias training, implicit and cultural competency training, every couple of years in order to renew their licensure. Despite the strong bipartisan support and the continued disparities, particularly in maternal mortality, this bill was vetoed by the governor, so we're going to keep fighting. Under health equity, we also had a really interesting new bill around presumptive eligibility for pregnant women, basically saying that women who meet the income requirements for Medicaid can be presumed eligible for Medicaid. They don't need to wait 6 weeks while their paperwork goes through various bureaucracies. They would be assumed to be eligible and then figure out the details later. The bill itself didn't get passed because of budget concerns, but there is a directive from the Virginia Department of Social Services to expedite processing for folks who are pregnant and applying for Medicaid. So it's a small step forward. There was another little bill I'll just mention on health equity that involved ensuring that maternal health facilities, labor and delivery units in rural parts of Virginia can remain open. This was a surprising bill that got some fascinating bipartisan support, once again, because rural areas tend to lean more Republican, and Dems tend to be the ones who are increasing access to healthcare. So that was a super fun bill. Talk to our health equity manager, Catherine, if you want to hear a 45-minute long explanation of how it all came to be. It was a blast. Moving into worker justice and supporting working families, we have our paid sick day bill. Once again, this bill would have ensured that every single worker in Virginia has access to 5 paid sick days. It passed the legislature, but was vetoed by the governor. So we're keeping it in front of people as we look toward this year's elections. We also had some bills around affordable housing. And this one, Faith in Housing would have allowed localities to streamline the process for congregations to build affordable housing. The bill was amended by the governor in such a way that instead of being enabling toward localities, it rather asks the Department of Housing and Community Development to list strategies localities can already use to stimulate affordable housing. Kind of like presumptive eligibility, this is a very small step forward. It's not everything we'd hoped for, but it's still good progress. And finally, our bill that surprised all of us was a bill on voter protection. You may recall that in September, Governor Youngkin put out an executive order to update voter rolls and remove voters based on DMV data. However, this meant that people who checked the wrong box at the DMV or who had become citizens since their last renewal of their licenses were cut from voter rolls. So this bill would have prevented people being cut from voter rolls. It was vetoed, but there is a lot of energy around increasing protection for citizen voters. So we'll see what we can do next year. And that's our list of priorities from this year. I want to briefly mention that the Northern Virginia legislators have been a lot of times the movers and shakers behind some of these bills. So, for example, oh my gracious. For example, the voter protection bill in the House was patroned by Delegate Rosia Henson, who's down in Prince William County. Paid sick days in the Senate. No, we didn't have a Senate patron. Occasionally, Barbara Favola, Senator Favola, has been a longtime supporter of paid sick days. She was a chief co-patron, but everybody had bill limits this year, and so we had a limited number of people who were actually able to be our champions on the floor. So Northern Virginia Democrats have long been active in a lot of the ICPP's issues. That said, especially in an election year, it is always important to remind your legislators of what your priorities are. Remind the delegates that the reasons we elect them and the reasons we are going to be looking to vote this November is going to be based on our values and based on these issues. Remind the senators that even though they're not up for election this year, this list of priorities are things that you value and want to see them continue to champion. So I highly recommend meeting with your legislators in the off season. I know that the NOVA chapter does a phenomenal job of organizing some of these meetings. And if you would like to reach out individually, or if you need additional support from the chapter or from the ICPP's Richmond office, I am always happy to help. I'll throw my email in the chat as well shortly. One other piece, in order to stay connected this whole time, is there are three chief ways that VICPP stays connected to our people. One is our email list. You all get an email from LaKeisha every single Wednesday. If you don't know it yet, surprise, you do. You should check your email inbox and then star that one. That's where we will share upcoming events, ongoing initiatives in the office and locally, as well as opportunities to plug into Zoom meetings and other events and, interesting news stories. The other two ways we have of keeping you informed are things like this, our chapter meetings, which happen about once a quarter, but occasionally more often when needed. We try to keep it highlighted on the events, updates, and calls to action, but we're always happy to support if there's any other specific information that's needed. But the third way, and one of my favorite ways to stay connected with the VICPP network, is our liaison program. We have congregational liaisons, which is where a member of a faith community signs up to be the bridge between VICPP and your local congregation. That means you read Keisha's email every Wednesday, you read an email from me once or twice a month, and you share resources where appropriate. Sometimes that's copying and pasting a bulletin announcement or a social media alert that I've written up for you. Sometimes that might mean inviting people to a legislative visit or to an event like our Advocacy Day for All People. But sharing resources where it's appropriate so that members of your faith community are able to live their call to justice. In addition, we're expanding the liaisons to include community liaisons. So if you, as we say in our mission, VICPP engages people of faith and people of goodwill who may not be members of a faith community. So if you're interested in having your neighborhood association or your pickleball club or soccer team be a part of VICPP, that liaison relationship, I'm happy to include you on those emails and invitations to Zoom calls. We have a couple of retirement communities who have community liaisons as well. A liaison can also be the bridge to their specific congregation, which might be a faith partner. Faith partners have a designated liaison and also collaborate on 2 or 3 VICPP initiatives throughout the year, donating financially to the work of the organization, perhaps inviting staff members to come speak, attending Day for All People, and doing other things like joining our 100% voting congregations or holding a prayer vigil for issues like solitary confinement or affordable housing. So all of those events and activities are open to all, but if you'd like to learn more about faith partnership or liaison roles, don't hesitate to reach out. The last one on my list here is this 100% voting congregation initiative. VICPP has been doing this for the last 3 years, and we are so pumped to bring it back in 2025, inviting faith communities to encourage 100% of eligible members to vote. That means offering voter registration, educating voters on what issues and people are on the ballot, and making sure that your faith community recognizes that voting is a civil sacrament. It's an opportunity to put faith into practice by voting our values. More details to come about that, but I just wanted to pique your interest. On the left side of the screen here, you'll see the first draft of our flyer for the VICPP Southwestern Road Trip. We're doing old school justice revivals. We're excited. If you happen to be in Wytheville this summer, come hang out with us. But I know most of you are Nova locals, so.
But thank you, Sheila. I think you touched on a lot of the issues that we cared about. And then there were some that maybe didn't get too much attention yet, but they might not be on the Interfaith Center's priority list, but they're certainly very concerning in some ways for Northern Virginia. So probably need to hear some comments about some of those at some point. But we'll go into that, and that will leave us some time for the Q&A. I'd like to bring up Kay Francis Dolan at this point. Kay Francis is I was going to say a full-time, that's probably not quite correct, but she is a volunteer with just for the benefit of the other folks who are on the Zoom session. Kay Francis is a volunteer with Virginia Interfaith Center through a relationship with the Ignatian Volunteer Corps, which is an organization that provides volunteer opportunities for people who want to do something within the poverty kind of area in response to a faith call. And it is designed for people who are probably in retirement. I mean, I think you can qualify to be an Ignatian volunteer even if you're as young as 50. But most of the volunteers with that organization are older and are finished with their career path, if you will. And so Kay Francis works with us at the Virginia Interfaith Center and has done just a marvelous job for the past few years in that capacity. So I just think it's fair that people should know that.
Well, thanks, Anne. You've heard a lot today about the summer of service and congregational liaisons and 100% voting congregations. And Sheila touched on this a little, but I thought I'd talk to you about what other actions we can be thinking about this summer and early fall. And I think what I'm going to talk about falls under the general category of civic engagement, which is one of VICPP's overarching priorities. So first, I hope it's not a big surprise to anyone that this is a big election year in Virginia. We have 3 statewide elections: governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Every seat in the House of Delegates is up for grabs, and there are many elections for local officials. So a few dates, I don't have a slide, but they're really only a couple of key dates. There is a Democratic primary that is June 17th. In Virginia, Republicans don't hold a primary. And of course, VICPP is a nonpartisan organization. But Virginia has open primaries. You don't have to be affiliated with the Democratic Party to vote in the Democratic primary. So please consider voting for a candidate that you would like to see at the governor forum that we're going to be getting here in September. The registration to vote or to update your registration date is a week from tomorrow, May 27th. You can apply for a mail-in ballot through June 6th. And early in-person voting is already ongoing and runs, I believe, until June 14th. You can check any of these dates with your local registrar, either your city or your county. Then, of course, we have the general election, which is November 4th. You can register to vote through October 14th. And we're lucky in Virginia, we have a very long in-person early voting period that runs from mid-September to just before the actual election. So if you're not registered or you've moved and you need to update your registration, please take care of that and think about the people around you, family members, new neighbors. Make sure that they get registered if somebody moves into the apartment or the house next to you. And VICPP will provide a lot of volunteer opportunities in the late summer and early fall, to include canvassing, door to door, and postcards. I saw something on the VICPP website recently that in 2023, we sent 10,000 postcards to voters in Virginia who maybe hadn't voted in a while and could benefit from a reminder. That's also something that your congregations could work on. And then what about the whole time between the primary and the November elections? Sheila hinted at this as well, but be on the lookout for candidate forums, not just the one for the governor, but ones that may come up in your county or your city. And if you see one, attend it and ask questions. Look at the VICPP priorities and formulate a couple of questions and talk about them. It's important for candidates to know what people care about. And it's important for voters to know candidates' positions. And we can help that to come about by asking questions at forums. Our legislators in the General Assembly really, really do care what their constituents think. It's pretty amazing to me how much attention they pay to their constituents. So if you happen to encounter any incumbents this summer, and we'd love it if you actually would even request a meeting with one of the incumbents to share some ideas, please thank them for their work and mention that you're a member of VICPP, as well as any other affiliations that you want to call attention to. And bring up a couple of issues that you care about. Maybe minimum wage increase, or an increase in affordable housing, or the importance of maternal health care, or the danger of Medicaid cuts. And ask them what legislation they're considering for 2025. And if you get any good intelligence about anything, please send an email so we can be on top of that. And finally, what about after the elections in early November? We'll have a chapter meeting in the fall, and you'll find out a lot about the next steps. But here's a heads up on what you can expect. We'll work to set up meetings with our state senators and delegates with an emphasis on the newly elected ones. Many of you have attended these meetings in the past, and several of you have volunteered or agreed with some arm twisting to lead them. And this is the chance for us to get VICPP's issues in front of legislators before they get to Richmond in January, when they're bombarded with meetings and issues and visitors. VICPP, fortunately, provides us issue papers. So we have talking points. And as Sheila mentioned, we're lucky in Northern Virginia that most of our legislators, in fact, probably all of our legislators, are supportive of many of VICPP's priorities. So the meetings with the legislators are really quite pleasant, whether they're in person at a cafe or a coffee shop, or they're on Zoom. So consider possibly doing that with some members of your congregation, especially the legislator who happens to be in the area your church is physically located in. So as I said, we will have more about that, but please think about these elections and about the issues that are so important to us and how you can support those and make sure that our legislators know what's important. That's all I've got, Anne.
Thank you, Kay Francis. And thank you, everyone, for your attention. Now we've got an opportunity for some Q&A and further clarification, etc. I think if we can open the screen to have everybody on the screen now, we don't need a spotlight. June Stowe from Fairlington United Methodist Church, also part of the leadership team, I think has been monitoring the chat a little bit. I didn't see a lot in there, but there might be more now. So please feel free to put a question in. If you don't know how to do that, raise your hand and we'll try to give you a shout out and give you an opportunity to say something.
I wanted to put a couple questions together because it's really, they both sort of deal with what's coming, what's the VICPP going to be looking at next year. And so one of the questions was on note that even though moving with an what are we going to do with things that we back this year that aren't specific priorities for next year? And then the other one that came in about what are we doing about gun violence, or will we be doing anything this coming year?
So Sheila, I invite you to come in with me on this one. As this last session, we definitely supported bills that touched on gun safety, gun prevention, and so we plan to continue to do that. As an organization with a small staff, we have to figure out what are those things that we can hold as priority and give lead on, and then name those things that we support. The way that we're planning for next year, we haven't like nailed the list down exact yet, but as we get closer to that, we will make sure that we share it. So that's my really long way of saying, yes, we're going to touch it. We just don't know exactly how much energy and effort we're going to be able to put into it.
It might be helpful, Keisha, to remind people on this session about the fact, without going into a lot of detail, but the fact is it's really the board of directors with the guidance of the staff who determine what the priorities are. Is that correct?
It's a collective process. And so as we're working in coalition with other advocacy groups, as we're talking to our base and we're getting out into our different regions and communities, they're able to let us know what's bubbling up from the community that is being held as priority, and that helps guide us in our priority making process. So it's a collective work and a collaborative one, which is why it's really important that we have moments like this so that we can hear what's coming straight from the communities that we serve.
And then are there Northern Virginia representatives that we should really be looking at, focusing on, that we need some attention from us as their constituents?
So I did a little bit of scrolling, and Lordy, I always forget how many legislators there are in Northern Virginia, so bless you all. A couple of celebrations. Delegate McClure has brought forward again and again some important worker rights bills, including getting farm workers covered by minimum wage. Delegate Bennett Parker has continued to be a great voice for tenant rights, as has Delegate Maldonado. Delegate Tran continues to speak about health equity and cover all kids. And Delegate Helmer, has brought up anti-gun violence bills that we've been supportive of, as well as a couple of interesting pro-housing bills. I'll say Delegate Marcus Simon is a really important voice to get good policy from, as is Delegate David Bulova and Delegate Charnel Herring. Those are three who haven't necessarily been leaders on VICPP issues, but their voices carry a ton of weight within the General Assembly. So those are three folks that it's well worth spending time with. Oh man, I only looked at the delegate list, not the Senate list. Give me one quick moment, but generally speaking, we've got some great folks. Delegate McPike, similarly, it's very likely one of our housing bills, our faith in housing bill, is likely to go through Delegate McPike's committee next year. So I just need him to like support everything we do. That's not strictly true, but you understand. I think raising these issues with him is going to be very helpful. Barbara Favola and Adam Evan, I think I mentioned, are often very supportive. So as is Delegate Boysko and Delegate Carol Foy. So some great names in the room, some folks who could probably use some strengthening. Yeah, off the cuff, that's what I've got.
Perhaps, Sheila, if you come up with some of the strengthening needs, I think those are the ones that would be very useful for us to be able to share around the area, Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax County for the most part. There may or may not be people here from Prince William, but generally we focus on those closer in. Sue has a question. She's raising her hand, but June, you may have others. I'm not sure. We only have about 2 more minutes.
Let's go with Susan, then I'll wrap up with one.
It's brief. I just was going to say, committee assignments are also very useful.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's all. Done.
And it sort of goes along with the last question was, what are things that really get, that we should be telling members of for the bills that are coming up? What are the kinds of things they like to hear?
It depends on the person. I'd say when you go in to meet with a legislator, there are 3 things to remember. 1, you belong in this room. They work for you. Your voice is important. And both Anne and June highlighted that, but it bears repeating. 2, make sure you have a concrete ask. You're asking them to support a bill or to patron a bill. You're asking them their thoughts on a particular policy to shape a bill going forward. During the off season, you can have a longer conversation about a concept, but you do still want to have an ask a next step. And then 3, my other favorite thing to say is you cannot argue with stories. If you've been affected by this issue, if someone you love has been affected by this issue, those stories wriggle in the hearts of our legislators and really can make a difference, can be spoken of on the House floor and all that jazz. So yes, make sure your facts and figures are correct, but always the stories are the heart of it. So
that's great.
Having good facts and good stories.
Thank you, Sheila. I want to thank everyone for coming. We hope that you are a little bit motivated maybe to continue working for justice with the center and with the chapter. And we hope that what you've heard has been helpful to you. I always like to make that final pitch. Remember that as a not-for-profit organization, the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy needs our financial support from our congregations as well as from individual advocates. So please remember to include VICPP in your annual giving. And then don't forget to mark your calendars. Watch the weekly roundup every Wednesday for events that are coming up, and take out your calendar when you're reading that weekly news and mark it accordingly. Most importantly, June 17, the Democratic primary. It's an open primary state. Everyone can vote. Early voting's already underway. November 4, Election Day. Everyone votes. And the Day for All People, January 2026, I think, is it the 21st? Or have you not set the date yet?
It's not official, but it will almost certainly be the 21st.
Okay, so mark it on your calendar with a tentative. Don't make other plans that day. If you're still working, ask for the day off so that you can join us in Richmond. Oh, write it in pencil. Well, the thing is, you know, when you're using one of these devices, Keisha, you don't write on it. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We hope it's been a helpful bit of time for you.